You've got the first one in, Annabelle.
Sorry, I thought a different meeting was right now, so I was not prepared for this. Let me think. Okay, so last week I talked to Mike about the new merge options that they're introducing. I don't actually have a sense of timing on that one, but from what I understood, they've considered a couple options, and what they're likely going to do is kind of break them up in the settings so that you can kind of pick your global merge strategy one option at a time, and then also offer those options in the merge widget. So we talked about the merge widget and how it's going to potentially look, and it looked like it was going to be adding kind of a bunch of checkboxes, and each time that you are merging that merge request, if you're allowed to, you can select different merge strategies. And so that's great for people who really want it. For people who aren't really caring about that and they just want to merge it and they don't really care, they just want to know what their settings are, I feel like that's not really the best experience to have to choose every single time. So we were talking about that, and I brought up that two-step merge widget again. I don't know if that's the right phrase, but you hit merge and then you get that pop-up, and it would either summarize all the things that are going to happen when you merge it, delete the branch, squash the commits, and then that would be a good place to also introduce those new merge strategy options, because you don't have to overload the widget at first. You can see it in that secondary piece, and it also offers that additional protection. Are you sure you want to merge? Yes or no, because I have accidentally merged merge requests in the past. So I saw that design from a different issue that Sun Jung worked on, I believe, with Pedro. And I wasn't sure if that was something that we had just kind of not thrown away, but like we decided not to move forward with that specific issue, but that design, I'm wondering if we could pull that out and rethink it, and maybe prioritize that in the next few milestones, do a little bit of research on just that two-step portion, so that by the time that these new merge options come up, then we can add them to that secondary merge step rather than putting them in the existing widget. Does that make sense to anyone?
Yeah, sorry, Ben, were you going to say something? Yeah, I was writing it down. I'm not sure if the merge widget and adding all of those options, I mean, it is the boring solution, but as you say, it's also the overwhelming solution, right? And even with, I mean, let's imagine we go all the way to the two-step process where you don't see all those options, you click somewhere and you see them. It's still overwhelming, because if people by default, we show them, and users are not so accustomed to these options, they're like, oh, what do I need to do? And they might actually break unintentionally the project's conventions on how you should commit things. Today, we give the option of squashing, but that is not necessarily the end of the world if people choose to squash or not squash, because the commits are still available outside of that. It is more of a problem when you write things to the target branch, to the canonical branch of the project, and the history is all over the place because we've given developers options to pick what they want.
But I think at least from what I gathered from the settings, is that at the project level, you can restrict that. So you don't need to give developers the options to like do a fast forward merge. You can deny them that option. So hopefully at the time of merge, you can't choose whatever you want. You can only choose what's been granted to you from the project level settings.
Oh, so this proposal is to mimic what we already have for squashing, which is you either allow or you deny or you enforce a specific setting. Right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that is better. But still,
So
The
the worst,
thing, yeah.
sorry, I was going to say the worst case scenario is if at the settings level, they allow everything. So every time that merge request is going to be merged, a developer can choose one of many options. And it's unlikely anyone would ever switch between fast forward and semi-linear, or is that the same thing? Whatever. They shouldn't be switching between these too much. But yeah, worst case scenario, there's like 6 options that they can choose from every time they merge, which, that's kind of weird. So we talked about like maybe hiding it in a little drawer or something like that. The actual design portion can come later, but I think that what you just reiterated is correct, that if we just jam all these into the existing widget, it is the boring solution, but it's going to look really cluttered. I hate using that word. I use it all the time and I'm sorry. It's going to look very confusing.
No, it's a boring solution that it's like taking a step forward and 2 step back at the same time, maybe. So for people that really want this, they will upvote the issue and say, oh, this is great, now I have what I want. But everyone else that didn't ask for this and then don't see a lot of value in it will be disturbed by this. So yeah, I just wanted to, so what I'm wondering now is not so much, the 2-step process of merging or showing these additional merge options and, giving project owners and maintainers the ability to say, hey, I want to enforce this setting, or I want people to be able to choose. Right now, what I'm wondering is if we need to take a step back and actually solve this from what the usual organizational convention is. Because that's, and that's why I quoted this part from the issue. Users expressed that there are times that they want a specific setting, merge commits, for example, for certain branches, feature branches, but they don't want it for certain other kinds of work or branches. And this is something I chatted with Mike about, and he saw that pattern where there seems to be, yes, for like a better word, like a pattern where, okay, I want this every time for this kind of branches, but not for these branches. And this aligns with the work that he's doing for the source code rules, where Ben was also involved. And we found out that, or validated our assumption that people want to organize the rules and policies of their source code according to branches. And so I'm wondering if we should actually take another route and build the ability for people to specify merge options per branch in the same way that you have protected branches and you say who can merge and who cannot merge, and wildcards, or even approval rules. Approval rules, we can scope it to specific branches and wildcard branches. And this is something I know Mike was thinking about doing regardless, because we think there's a need there. I'm just wondering, is that maybe the next best step that we can take, instead of putting all of the burden in the end user, in the merge requests, and in the merging moment? We actually try to solve that at the organization level in the settings before. And the worst case scenario is, for some reason, some organization thinks that for certain branches, they want to give developers the ability to choose what they want. I think that should be the worst case scenario, not something that we immediately allow them to do in the first iteration. We might want to first try to go through the best practices approach, which is to set patterns and rules according to branch types. Yeah, I don't know if I talked a lot. I don't know if that makes sense. And I'm sorry I couldn't join the other call.
I was gonna, and you started going down that branch like train of thought. It wasn't anything that had crossed my mind before, but it was like light bulby, and like, why isn't this just a setting under protected branches that, like, because it sounds like it's features and protected branches is where sort of this distinction is. So like for the protected branches, this, you care about something, which is why it's a protected branch to begin with. And then for everything else, you sort of like can have loose organizational policies, or you could have sane defaults, or you could do whatever. That sort of sounded like a rational way to do this. Because I agree with you too, when you speaking earlier about like the two-step merge widget, my sort of first question was, okay, we took them out of the widget, but we put them all in this other screen. Like, does that really solve anything for us in terms of like screen space or usability, or how do we guide people through it? We just have like put it behind a click, which I'm not sure that would be super helpful in that case. I do like the two-step merge widget for like other reasons, but I don't know if it's like the answer to this one. But yeah, I agree that maybe it's worth like going back to Mike. And I also, I was thinking about this in like a lines are blurred between source code and code review world, in that like source code is responsible for like Git level operations on merging and sort of like how that works and how the repository is controlled and that sort of things. And then we're responsible for the user experience. So I think it is sort of like on us to be very collaborative. So I appreciate that we are being that way, but it is sort of on us to think about how we want users to consume this, because that is an integral part of the merge experience.
I understand what you're both saying about branches. I just wonder how many, I kind of lean towards not doing, I don't know that much about it. I suspect that most organizations are just going to restrict it, not because they really, really care a whole lot about their specific commit history, but just because it is easier, like just to have it by default and then not allow the developer every time to change their merge strategy. So in that way, it's looser and more people can use it the way they want to. And then for the people who really don't care, just set it up the way that you want your commit history to be. And then don't give developers those extra options and they'll never know otherwise. It seems a little more flexible that way to me. The people who really, really want this feature will get what they want. The people who don't care will not notice, and it'll just work kind of for everyone.
The way I get what you're saying, but I think the way we should try, this is my personal view, we should try to think about the options is similar to that other issue about media uploads and diff previews, where initially we try to find a pattern that fits everyone, and that is in the backend. It's not visible. It's not something you control. It just works, right? But then we realize, oh, maybe we actually need a setting for this. But let's put that setting at a level that you just have a good default and you just set once and then change it if you want and you forget about it. We're not going the extra level, which is the most flexible would be users choosing at their user preference level if they want diff previews in their emails or not. And you could argue, oh, this is very flexible and now people can choose whatever they want. But I think immediately going to the most flexible option, while it solves everyone's problem more or less, it might just create more problems for the organization and more work for us in the end, and a heavier experience. So, and that is to say, I think typically that's what we've done at GitLab historically, is go immediately to the most flexible solution so that we can please everyone immediately. But actually, if we try to be more progressive about it, which we've done, for example, with squash commits, if you remember, before we just had that checkbox and developers would be able to choose if they want or not. And then after that, we realized that there's actually an organization need before that. And now we've added the ability to allow, deny, require, or inquire or encourage squashing. So we actually did things in a different order. We should have probably done that first, the ability to allow, require, and so on, and then surfacing that to the user. So I'm more in the camp of doing this progressively and without burdening the user immediately and giving them all the flexibility. If most of the time they don't need it and they're going to probably follow the organization's policies.
You want to voice that over, Ben? And then I was gonna.
Sure.
add another
Yeah.
comment.
Just a data point from the benchmarking. When we had tasks that related to changing protected settings like that, who can merge whatever, no one looks under settings repository before they look near the branches themselves, either on the list of branches or on the main repository page. That was a universal click-through path that we're missing something there. So, I don't know the full history of why things are where they are. I understand settings has been a thing for a while, but just so, I noticed that as a really glaring thing. People sort of want those settings to be somewhere else.
I don't know if Pedro wants to voice that or not. Since he's still typing, I'll let him.
No, it's, yeah, you can read it, but I think it's aligned with what we want to do with that. That is not possible today because branch rules, as you know, are all over the place. You have approval rules in one place, you have protected branches in another place. But the work that Mike is doing to consolidate all of the rules would allow us in the future to do just that, to people, see the branches list and maybe have a link that says, I want to configure rules for this branch. And they go there and everything is there to see what is controlling this branch and what is applicable to it. So it's good that we already have this data points. Thanks, Ben.
All right, so back to Annabelle's maybe original point. I love the branches idea. We should talk to Mike about it. Seems to make sense in terms of where you put this, but maybe that's a different conversation. I think the question still is, even if we put this in branches and someone decided that they wanted to make all of the options available, there would still have to be an experience for that somewhere in the merge request. And so I think the question becomes like, how is the answer like we would solve that by just making the merge widget a series of incredibly complicated checkboxes for users, and that's sort of where we would start, and we would recognize that that is like a subpar experience, but that subpar experience is like predicated on you having created a subpar like default, or would we or do we need to also think about this? Like, do we need to, I guess the question is really, do we need to solve this and like really spend some time thinking about where do we want these to be in the merge widget? Or are we of the belief that it's unlikely that someone will have all of these things, and so like just putting them in a checkbox is whatever and we move on with our lives? Also, I love the split dropdown. I wish they were a thing in GitLab. I don't know why we fight them so hard, but
Wait. Sorry, did you say that because I was just showing that? Where did it go?
yeah, I did because I saw it, because that is my most favorite view of the merge widget, is the split dropdown one. And every time we talk about split dropdowns, people get all like, but they're not in pajamas and we don't know how they're supposed to work. And it becomes this like contentious argument about like having split dropdowns. And I'm just like, I mean, this is a very like normal UI pattern in almost every other application. And we have some wild aversion to this.
I have that wild aversion. I hate them too. I think that they did some research where people weren't sure, like, okay, you click on the drop down, you select that that second or third option. You don't know if clicking it right away is going to perform the action, or you still need to click it again. And we have mixed usage on GitLab where sometimes you have to click it again and sometimes selecting it performs that action. So it's a little weird. It is nice that it hides the things that you might not necessarily want to see. I've seen a competitor do this, and I was kind of confused at first when I saw it for the first time. So yeah, the two options I just wanted to show on screen, I should have shown this earlier. The settings that I was talking about were option A, I think this is. So everything is kind of split between the squash, commit, and method. And then the option B was more like combining everything. So you kind of have to read every single option and make sure that it fits all your needs. And it was just a little more confusing. So as it is right now, it could look something like this with all these extra checkboxes, which is a little non-ideal. So yes, I agree that the two-step merge widget doesn't necessarily solve that problem, but I think it'll help a little bit in that it's going to be slightly hidden and not all at once. We should do it anyway. I agree. It's got lots of benefits that have nothing to do with this. I just didn't want to add this as is because it looks like a mess. And I didn't want to offer all these options right on the page where we already have a billion other options. But I also think that it is worst case scenario if you allow every single item here, then you're going to get all these options. I don't know how common that's going to be. I don't know if that's been like super researched or if it's just like a small group of people that want to allow everything. I'm unsure. So it could look something like this. You see a lot of checkboxes either way.
Could it look, I mean, if you go back up to the other, if that is like the actual settings, I know we do this thing now with squash commits where if you say require, we check it and gray it, I think, on the merge widget. I know we now have this like new, I'm pointing at my screen, this new like light gray line that tells you what's going to happen that doesn't exist today. Yeah, the one that says like one commit and one merge commit will be added. If we assume that people will say like, enforce implementation history, merge commits require and allow squash commits when merging require, we could just not show checkboxes and add that to like the metadata below, right? And really only show checkboxes if you're in an optioned state, or would that be, or like, could we just, if we have a belief, and this goes back to sort of Pedro's thing of like protected, if this is branches and organizational policy, if we have a belief that people don't want the flexibility for whatever, if that's the higher percentage of users, then could we sort of build the experience to like, if you're using things that aren't options to begin with, like we just don't show you, maybe we add that as like meta information that we tell you what's going to happen, but like we don't need to necessarily like show you that these checkboxes are checked and grayed out. And that keeps the widget very small unless you've sort of configured yourself to be in a world that's like less ideal versus making what I think this would do with like, unless you disallowed all of these things and then those checkboxes wouldn't be there, but like sort of puts all these checkboxes in front of users all the time, even if they can't do anything with them.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if it's for accessibility reasons or this design isn't even what we have on production. A lot of it looks different. It's not just the sentence. I don't even think we have like this layout. I'm not sure where it came from, but
it's the new widget that will be done this milestone, maybe next milestone soon. I gave these to Mike when he started this because I knew we were already working on the refactor. So he's working off new designs.
Okay. But yeah, I think this is another wonderful place for the second step merge widget where you could have like a list of all the things that are going to happen in that merge. And we don't necessarily have to put these disabled inputs that you can't act on everywhere. And then, it would list, it's going to create a merge commit. And then maybe like it could say something about it's set at the project level. And that's why it wouldn't say it like that, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think the second step is something that we will need to do. One of other great benefit is the ability for merge request authors and external contributors to edit the commit messages, which is something that people have asked for a long time is, hey, when they're setting the squash commit or something like that, being able to say, hey, this is the commit I want to have used. But to go back to Kai's question, hey, suppose we did go to the branches route and someone did select all the options, we'd still have to solve that. And I think we don't have to solve that, at least initially, and until we have validated that people actually need that, right? Because if we meet the users where they're saying their behavior is, and they're saying that sometimes they need it for certain branches and sometimes they don't, if we solve that first, and at the settings level, they choose merge options for all branches or for specific branches, we can then see if there's still a real need to give developers the ability and the power to choose options at the merge moment. And maybe it isn't that much of a big deal. And to be honest, I'm skeptical of giving a developer or anyone the ability to create a merge commit if they want. And how do you choose if you want a merge commit or not at the merge moment? Squashing, like, it's your commits maybe, or you review the list of commits. I know I want to squash them. It makes sense for this merge request, but a merge commit, you probably have to, get your information elsewhere of, hey, does this warrant a merge commit or not? So I don't think that's the best moment to make that decision. So yeah, I think we don't need to cross that bridge right now of giving developers the options in the merge moment if we solve the branches first.
So just so I understand what you're talking about with branches, are you saying like if your branch begins with the word feature, then
yeah,
don't squash, create a merge commit?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And then if it's something else, what's an example of what's an example of a branch name where you always want to squash the commits, like bug fix or something?
Yep.
Fix
this.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Or for example, you only want merge commits when you merge to main, for example. For every other branch, you don't need merge commits, for example. I don't know. Or maybe the opposite. Maybe you want to squash everything every time you merge into main, and you want to keep the more granular history in the feature branches. That's then the issue, is that every organization has a different view, but at least we're solving it at the branch and as far away from the everyday work that everyone will see all the time and have to make decisions every day.
So developers would never have these options in the merge widget.
To begin with, that would be my suggestion, is try to solve it at the settings and organization level first. And if after that, if people really need it and we think it's worth solving for that, we will then show those options. But then we will run into that problem that we probably then need, the two-step merge, and we needed another area and to set the merge options.
Cool. I think the takeaway is like, we want to go back. I will, once this video is uploaded, I'll make sure we share it with Mike. I assume Annabelle or Pedro, one of you, will probably meet with Mike about this again at some point, so we can also continue to discuss that way. I appreciate, Annabelle, you bringing this up. Sorry we derailed it from two-step merge, but it was good to talk about this feature in general and help get everyone up to speed and get some more clarity on options and ideas here, because this will be an interesting change to watch unfold. So it's good to talk about it early. Ben, you got the last one. We're up against time, but
Just have a look and let me know if you have any questions or comments or otherwise. And I appreciate you guys taking some time for this. That's it.
all right. Well, thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week and day.
Cool. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.